Good afternoon. This is Dr. Bill White again with the American Orthodontic Society, and I want to talk to you a little bit about rectangular arch wires. I just feel like there's a lot of people doing orthodontics, even some orthodontists that don't fully understand what a rectangular arch wire can do and how it does it, and I just wanted to run over some of these things. I won't be able to get over all of them, but enough that you'll learn a good bit about rectangular arch wires. Now, when you use rectangular arch wires, of course you use brackets with a rectangular slot in the bracket itself, and well, let me get over here this silly thing. Like you have a bracket that comes down here and has a slot in it and something like this, and comes down and it has this and this bracket. Now the ones we're using are single brackets, and they have a little vertical slot back in here, and then the base of the bracket where it's bonded to the tooth here. Now this rectangular slot right in here will be either 0.22 or 22 thousandths large in this direction, and it'll be 28 thousandths in this direction right here. Now personally, I like to use a bracket that's only 18 thousandths. In other words, it will be, take 18 from that, it'll be 4 thousandths smaller right across here, and the gap in here will be 4 thousandths smaller, and it will only take wires up to 18 thousandths wire, rectangular wire for 18 thousandths. With the one that fills the gap fully would be an 18-2-5 arch wire, and the 2-5, the 18 thousandth slots are only 25 thousandths deep, whereas the 22 thousandths are 28 thousandths, and these are 25 thousandths, or in other words, it's 3 thousandths less in this horizontal dimension, and 4 thousandths less in the vertical direction. And I like to use that and use smaller wires in doing this. So the brackets are made in these two forms right here for 018 or 022 slots. And so let me erase that thing and come up and show you. Now, when we buy rectangular wires or brackets with certain torque already built in them so that they angle a tooth a certain way. Say you've got a central, I'll try to draw a decent central up here, and maybe it's torqued something like that. And so some people want more torque. Now the base of the bracket would fit on this, and your bracket would be there, but the bracket slot would be straight out. Usually the tooth would be less angled than that, and the bracket slot would be like that. It would be tipped out. My drawing is terrible, but maybe you can understand this. So the tooth, if the wire were just straight in this, it might, on a central, might have 10 degrees torque in it. I think Whitsey, or one of the better known orthodontists, put 25 degrees torque in his central teeth, but then he used an 018 arch wire to do his work in here. Well, the 018 was several thousand smaller. In other words, it's an 18 in a 022 bracket, so it was 4,000 smaller, and for every thousandth slop you get in this deal, you lose 4 degrees of torque. So he lost 4, so he lost 16 degrees, and you subtract that 16 from 25, and he had 9 degrees of torque in his upper centrals, and he was using a smaller wire than the 022. Now that kind of may confuse you. You don't have to remember that. So let me just start out and show you some things about the rectangular brackets, and these are the ones we use. I like small or just a single size bracket. You see, I like to have a lot of inner bracket space. In other words, in here between the brackets would be a greater distance than if we had a twin bracket. In other words, your bracket would fill the gap from, say, from here to here, and your distance would be this much here, whereas with these smaller brackets I get a much bigger inner bracket space. And so what that does for you is it allows you to bend the wire more in between the teeth here without permanently distorting the wire. And then that tooth, in other words, you can torque quicker with an 018 wire because you can put more torque and flex the wire down and put it into a slot where you've got greater bracket space in there. So that's what I like about the small brackets. Now if I need to rotate it, I'll put a wedge underneath here, a plastic wedge. Say I want to rotate this tooth in this direction, I would put a plastic wedge under the arch wire. The arch wire, you'd have to loosen it, take it up, put the wedge in here. Now when you put the arch wire back down on the wedge, it doesn't fit all the way down in the bracket. So now we have to press on the arch wire and take a wire, maybe a little elastic thing won't hold the wire down in there that tight. So I take a wire and push the arch wire down, which would depress the plastic block. And as I depress the plastic block, it puts a lot of pressure on this side of the tooth right here. And I tie it down there with this pressure on it, and this tooth will rotate in that direction. It just spins it around or so much. Now that's not the best way to rotate if you've got a lot of rotation to do. I think we show you in a video just totally about how to rotate teeth with about 4 links of elastic chain. So you hook, if I wanted this tooth to rotate this way, you know, I would have to hook the wire over here. Let's see, no, I wouldn't do that. If I wanted to rotate the tooth in this manner, I would hook the wire over on this side, go around the tooth. On a cuspid like this, you'd have to put a little glob of composite to keep the elastic chain up on the tooth, and come in and hook the elastic chain to the bracket, but not go over the arch wire. So you have to raise the upper arch wire up, get the plastic chain hooked onto the bracket, and now it will rotate this tooth better than anything that I know of. You can go back and study that on the video on rotation of the teeth, and we can do that with round or rectangular wires. Now we can move teeth with a rectangular wire in virtually any direction or whatever we want the tooth to move. In other words, we can make it go up, we can make it go down, we can turn it right or left, we can tip it from one side to the other, we can actually tip the whole bunch of teeth and make the whole arch move in this direction. And that's what we do a lot of times when we have TMJ cases that the jaw needs to be advanced out and the teeth don't fit together where the teeth are here. So if we advance it, they don't fit. But now we can advance the maxilla to get to where the lower teeth can fit into the groove where they want to in here. You can advance the whole thing, and then we can advance, take the lower teeth back a little by tipping. So now let me just cover tipping for a few minutes. I'm bouncing around here. I realize that. I'm going to show you, like, we can take this tooth here with a rectangular wire, or actually you can do tipping with a round wire. It'll rotate the tooth around this point if you're tipping a tooth, either round or rectangular wire. Now, to tip this tooth, if I want to bring this root of this tooth, say it goes up to here, and I want to tip this tooth and make the root go back here, then I can change this arch wire right at this point. So what I would do would be drop the arch wire here and go across it right here and then drop it back again. Now that's a lot of tip to put in that, but I can tip this that much, and then I can flex this wire, that's where your inner bracket space comes in, and put it in there, and it will tend to force this tooth to move in this direction. Now when you put tip in an arch wire, the tooth is going to rotate around where the bracket comes in contact with the tooth. And a lot of beginning people in this don't realize that. And it does that whether you're tipping with a round wire or a rectangular wire, if it rotates like that. Now if I just push on this tooth with something over here, with not an arch wire in there, the tooth will rotate where the root fits in the, say, in the bone up here. Maybe this much of the tooth is in the bone right here, and I push on it. Well, it'll rotate somewhere up in here. It'll go down over here, and this root will go in this direction, and the crown will go in that direction, and it'll rotate somewhere down in here. Where it's sticking in the bone. But if I tip this tooth with an arch wire off of a bracket, in other words, I come down here and go up like this and drop down to the arch wire again, I put this piece of wire in that bracket, then it's going to tip this tooth like that, or it would go straight off of that wire like that, and this part of the tooth would go forward, see. So if I want to move the maxillary teeth in a forward direction, all I would have to do is now this is more than you think. You can put tip like this in the wire. Now you get up here to front, you get to the cuspid, you don't want to do that, but you can tip it like that. And I can come in and put tip back in the molars in the same way. And it moves the crown of the tooth in a forward direction. The root is up here in the bone structure, and it doesn't move as much as the crown. So when I put this tip, it's going to rotate around this bracket, and it'll do something like this. It'll do this, and you'll move the crown forward. So if you just want a little bit of movement in these, you can do this tipping. Now, for instance, I had a lady chiropractor was sent in to me by Dr. Charles Holt, who did nothing but the TMJ stuff. And this woman had a absolutely beautiful set of teeth that occluded, and then they interlocked, and everything was just perfect, except she had a bad TMJ problem. In other words, the condyle was pushing in to this retrodiscal tissue that I want to talk more about that later on. The retrodiscal tissue that produces the synovial fluid, and it's highly vascular, and if you put pressure on it and it do it for a while, it'll get inflamed and irritated, and it's not producing the synovial fluid for the joint. And this lady was having all kind of pain with it, and I had to advance her mandible. Now when we advanced her mandible, her bottom teeth fit out here as far out as the upper teeth, or maybe a little further, and it looked bad. I mean, you couldn't leave it like that. It didn't fit together. So I had to move the maxillary teeth out in relation to the lower teeth. And I didn't want to mess up the teeth at all, so I did this tipping like this. And that brought the upper teeth forward just a millimeter and a half or something like that. And then I tipped the bottom teeth going in the opposite direction. See, you can tip them. And you can move these teeth back, but the jaw bone and everything, as I move the teeth back, they fit further forward, so the condyle stayed off of the retrodiscal tissue back here. And that's what we were after. And then I kept her teeth lined up and looked beautiful that way. So you can use this information in so many ways in dealing with situations like that. Now, if I take and go in and out with a tooth, I'll have to get to a different picture here. Let me go back. Well, it's not that one, and it wouldn't be this one, but this one. Now, if I move this tooth in or out with a rectangular wire, I have the arch wire where it fits the slot in here. I can put torque on it and make this root tip go out in that direction, and the crown will stay pretty much here. It will go back slightly, but the tooth will rotate around this bracket. In other words, I don't know how to illustrate that perfectly, but let me try a little bit. Now, if I take a bicuspid tooth, something like this, and the crown is coming across this way, and the roots coming down and coming back up, something like that, and I want to move this bicuspid tooth in this direction, and I've got a bracket out here on the tooth right here, and I've got a wire in there that fits in the groove of the bracket. You see, the bracket would be out here, and it fits in this groove. Now, when I move this wire out, it tends to rotate this tooth right around this bracket slot. I would put torque in this, then it would make the crown go back this direction slightly, but the root would come out a lot further. So it's going to rotate around here. Where if I pull this tooth out here in a round wire, and I put the force on it, it's in a round wire, then the tooth can rotate right around here, but it won't rotate up here at the front as much. It'll just, if I try to bring it out with that, it will just come out up here, and with this part of it would rotate down here, and it would go back in this direction. So when I want to put buccal root torque on teeth that we expand, that somebody hadn't developed the maxilla, I want to put buccal root torque on it, I have to put it on with a rectangular slot, you see. In other words, you'd have on your rectangular wire, you come out something like this. Now, if I had this fitting, there's a bracket and it's fitting on this tooth back here, the tooth coming here, and I put buccal root torque, in other words, it's something like this, whereas to start off the arch wire went in here with just straight torque with nothing on it. Now I put this buccal root torque, I flex this wire and engage it in here. Now that wire is going to try to bring this part of the tooth out, and it'll bring the upper part of the tooth in slightly. And I don't want, and if you just put this buccal root torque and you don't put something really strong out here, it'll carry the crown in more than it'll carry the root out, because the root of this tooth would be in bone structure down here, and you put this buccal root torque, you've got to really support this and keep it out in this direction. Don't let it go back in this direction. If you put the buccal root torque and have a weak arch wire, in other words, the arch wire has a lot of strength in the torque, but not in and out pressure. You can push the arch wire together back here real easy, but you torque it, it'll overpower the lateral expansion of a regular arch wire. And so buccal root torque would be lingual crown torque. In other words, it would bring this crown in. But we come in and put a great big old wire out here that's expanded out, and this tooth can't even start to move that in. And then we will get buccal root torque will develop. Now this would be upside down. We're wanting to develop the maxilla where the airway is so that the person can breathe. See, a lot of these young kids start off, they don't nurse, they don't develop the airway, or they're allergic, and they breathe through the mouth. They keep the mouth open, they spread their lower arch out, but not their upper arch. So all this stuff ties together, and I want you to learn how to use a rectangular wire. It is marvelous, and the guys that made them to start off with, I don't know that they even realize what a benefit it was going to be. Maybe they did, they knew more about it than we think. Now, the one that started with the 022 bracket, the reason he cut the slot 022 is that was the size of the disc that he had. We cut a 22 thousandths groove, and so he cut that and made his first brackets with 022, and most people got a hold of them and started using 022. And when the rectangular wires came along, I mean, we could do, I didn't know it back, well, I did too. I had my teeth straightened, and they used the labial-lingual technique, and they couldn't do doodlysquat compared to what we can do today, or even a good many years back, using a rectangular wire. We had it on banded teeth. All right, so if you're carrying the tooth in and out this way, and you do it with a rectangular arch wire, you can make the tooth rotate around the bracket. Otherwise, with a round wire, if you just pull it out here, the tooth rotates kind of like you just pushed on it, you see. But doing tip, where you're tipping the tooth back and forth like this, I don't know how much of this stuff you can see, but I want to pass this on so you understand. I can move the whole maxillary complex of teeth forward by simply tipping all of these teeth. I don't do the upper. If I did, I would put more torque in these teeth. If I'm going to bring these out, then I can put torque. Now, torquing the anterior teeth makes them move out this way also, because I'm pushing back on the root, and the crown moves out. When I torque my front teeth out here, centrals and laterals, and you tip the cuspid, but if it's more or less in the front, it wouldn't, tip doesn't bring it out that much. But the centrals, if you tip them, the roots don't move in the bone very much. The crowns move out more. And so that brings, in other words, I can torque these teeth more, and I can tip these teeth, and the cuspids usually, if it's on the round here, you can tip it and tip it. So molars and bicuspids and everything, we can advance the maxilla and make it further out. Now I can move my lower jaw out and the teeth will fit like they did, but I move the condyle away from this retrodiscal tissue where the synovial fluid is formed, and it's highly vascular, and it's people can write a whole book on it. It's like it feeds the disc. It carries the food structure in, and it takes the waste products out, kind of like kidneys or something. It's amazing what this retrodiscal tissue does, and how it kind of excretes this synovial fluid into the upper joint space and the lower joint space. And you need to know something about that to treat that. All right, this is some of the blessings and the wonderful things that you can do with a rectangular arch. Now, when I have my brackets made up on the lower ones, I put little lingual buttons. Now, if these irritate the tongue, we put the little rubber O-rings over them that we put over the brackets. Just put them over like that, and that will keep that from irritating the tongue. And then if you want to put a rotate teeth or close space, you can do it with elastic chain up something like that. Come back and hook it to the molar. You can pull this back. You can pull harder on one side and rotate this tooth. It's a lot of little tricks to doing things, so that's why I put those buttons back. Now on the sides, I bond, or I have the manufacturer bond the lower brackets 3/4 of a millimeter lower on my molars than normally they make them, simply to keep the upper buccal cusp of the molars from hitting the bracket. If they hit the bracket, you've got a long cusp a lot of times they were hitting the brackets right here, and that kept things open, and it screws up a lot of stuff when you're doing that. So I make my lower, the manufacturer of the bands I get, and I put the brackets, I put double tubes on the 6-year molars, just regular tubes on the second molar right here, and I may just put a bracket on the second molar, but I band all my 6-year molars in doing, say 6-year molar, I take the 6-year molar out, and then the second molar takes the place of the 6-year molar, and it's treated just like a 6-year molar in there. Okay, now here's a close-up of one of these small single brackets. Now if I want to rotate this tooth, say in this direction, it would be rotated away from it. In other words, it would be setting up like this, where this side of the bracket would be hitting over, the arch wire would be hitting over here. We loosen this up and raise the arch wire and put a little plastic wedge in here. It's not a wedge, it's a little block, and it's got 2 deals on it that holds it underneath the arch wire. When I put that on there, that picks the arch wire up away from the bracket here. Now I can come in, I'll have to tie that with a tie wire. I push the arch wire down tight against this side over here and ligature it and have the wire tied down to where it touches the bracket, or touches, or at least it's tried down a lot. That puts a lot of pressure underneath this, and that rotates this too. So you can rotate them with these little plastic blocks that have little bumps on them here that keep them under the arch wire. That's an advantage. Now all these little brackets have a vertical slot in them, and you can buy these little thin metal deals from, I used to, it's from TP Lab. I assume they still do it, but maybe they've sold out to another company or something. But those are on the market, and you can buy those things and stick them in from the top, bend the edge. This metal is real soft. You bend it over. Now you can hook elastics up here, or you can hook them this way, going in this direction. Now, if I'm going to use a class 2 elastic with my little brackets, I put these things in from this direction. So now these deals are sticking down low, and this is stiff enough. I can hook a class 2 from here down to the lower molar, you see. And that makes my rectangular box of the class 2 elastic has much less vertical force on it, and much the same amount of horizontal force, or maybe a little less. In other words, that thing comes up and I hold it. Now, this would be the class 2 elastic. If I had it like this, then this rectangular box would go way up, much bigger, and I'd have a greater vertical pull on it. In other words, I'd lower these teeth more using class 2 elastics than I would if I had the hook down low. So this is something everybody ought to know all this stuff as you do this. And you need to, you can't learn it all in one weekend or anything. You go to some guy who's teaching you, and you have to go for weekend after weekend and weekend. I can't tell you how many lectures I've been to over the years, and in learning the orthodontics. And you've got to have some mechanical idea about it yourself I've had people that's just real smart people, but just could not learn the mechanics of orthodontics. And I don't mean to downgrade them. They're smarter than I am, you know. And a lot of times you get a brilliant guy in as an orthodontist, but mechanically the guy can't, has a difficult time doing it. He might memorize it, but you got to figure it out, and it's mostly common sense. You can learn to do anything with these teeth. So we've shown you how to rotate with these, not wedges, but plastic blocks in here. Put them on either side of the tooth and do that. Now if you got a lot of rotation, you hook the elastic chain on it, go around the tooth, come back up and hook to the bracket, but not over the arch wire, and it'll turn the tooth in that direction. So that covers rotation. It's covered in several other videos also. Now let's look back here at the back. I always use omegas in the arch wires, you see, like that. And you lean them, and that omega forming plier, it will automatically, you ship it over to one side and clamp it, and it'll put a tilt to the omega so that you can tie the arch wire back and push back here. Now another thing I need to show you here, well, this is just a tie back. I can come over to this side and tie this passive, and I can go to the other side and tie it back, tie this all get out, and you can blanch the tissue between the two centrals up here. If you got a space up there, you can take the arch wire and tie it back so tight you can just blanch that tissue. And when you do that, I pointed this out on the arch on a deal. Seemed like last night I was talking on here. Let me go back to, I'll go back to here where this is a round arch wire. Now, if I tighten this arch wire up, or I'll tie it passively over here to hold this arch wire to keep it from sliding, and then I come over and tighten this really tight. Now this is a pretty stiff wire, but it will tend to flatten that wire in between these teeth. It has a minute curve to it, you see, and that flattens that out. That arch wire has a certain amount of curve going between two bracket spots in here, and as you tighten that wire up, this curvature straightens out. And that is just a closing spring on the arch wire. You do not need any other closing device. You can close just darn near any kind of gap you want to in there, except when we have these big gaps, we want to keep the roots going with the crown. Then we will come in and make a deal something like this, and we'll go off like that, and we bring it up here. Now this is, we tighten that up and pull it, and that's pulling the roots of this tooth. Say there's a molar here, and it's got its roots down here, and we're pulling it over to a bicuspid or something over on this side. And we want to come over here with these roots straight up and down just like they are. And if you pull this up here, now you can run your tie back wire through there and pull on it and push on it hard and tight. If you're pulling too much up here, the crown will lean more than the root. If you don't pull it much and you've got quite a bend in this, then the roots will get out in front of the crown. So there you have to pull more or reduce this bevel in this. And I can bring this crown all the way up to this and meet the bicuspid. Now also this, as you straighten it up, it does this to the bicuspid, and it'll pull the bicuspid root and the molar root, and this will come together here with the bicuspid and the molar both having the root parallel. Now that's so that you've got a big gap you're closing, and it'll bring the roots together as you close that. I'll have to probably do a video on that just to show more people how to close a gap, a molar gap, and bring this molar up here. If I don't want this molar to move, I put a screw in the bone right here somewhere, and then bond this bicuspid to that screw, and then I can pull on this and it stays where it is, and this molar will move all the way up to there, you see. Now you bond this, and when you get real close up here, sometimes you run into the bonding of the screw, and you got to take that, and then you come off with class 2 elastics and finish up the job right there. Now this is a big dose for somebody to swallow, to learn all of this at one time. You won't just walk off and decide you want to do orthodontics and come in and pick all this up at one time. You're going to have to use it, and gradually you will see it. Once you do something with it, and you know how to do it, and you see something to do it, then it becomes easy for you. But prior to that, it's difficult for you to do some of these things. So anyway, we've covered the rotation with these plastic blocks in here. I hope you understand how we do that. And that way we got rid of the wings. Now, if you have the wings and you put sealant all over this, then you just bend the wing up and it'll push on the wire over here. You tie the wire down tight, and that rotates the tooth too. And so I use the wing brackets a good bit, but the ladies that work for me like to go with these, and we'd try to put them dead center, or if the tooth is pretty, like you have one tooth here and one tooth in here, something like this, and another one over here, and we know we got to rotate, I will try to get the bracket off to the rotated side, just a little bit off center, so that tends to rotate it a little bit more than it would need eventually, and you take this off, it'll kind of move back slightly. So we learned to rotate teeth with this, and the ladies that worked in the office, they got to where they were very good. And you pick ladies that are mechanically minded to work in the office, and we had them do everything that they legally could do, and they got to where they were extremely good. And I took them places, and they would teach dentists, pediatric dentists and regular dentists, and how to bend and do these arch wires, where I had taught them, and so that they could make these arch wires outside the mouth, and I'd go put them in, and stuff like that. Okay, this is something you need to learn how to do, but on your class 2s, if you pull from the bottom down here, it saves you a lot. You don't do much vertical pulling down of these teeth with your class 2s and raising up the molars. It more or less pulls the thing straight together when you're doing it. Now, I probably have forgotten a lot of things I wanted to. Oh, I need to show you one more thing. A lot of times where you band the 6-year molar and you band the second molar, or you put the bracket on the second molar, and if you went straight off from where your bracket was and it was out here, it would pull this molar over, and it would not line these buccal cusp, these teeth up. So we have to change the arch wire back here. We'll make a bend in it behind the 6-year molar. When you do that, you've got to convert this tube that you start off with, you peel it off, and now it's a bracket. So we put our arch wire through there, and then we've got to tie the bracket onto the tooth and do the rest of the stuff that you used to just slide the wire through there. So when you have to make a bend between the teeth, then you have to convert this bracket. So they make 6-year molar brackets with the slot you're going to use for your regular arch wire. It will be a convertible slot, and they make a little thing that picks that off, or you can buy a more expensive instrument that peels that off a little bit better than the little can opener type that you can get for that, or you can make your own if you want to. Okay, let's see. Now that's another one where the second molar, the attachment is just a tube. We don't have it convertible or anything else. Unless you were going to have a third molar banded here, then you'd have to put a 6-year molar band back here that you could convert to it in case you had to bend the wire between your second and third molar. So these are some things you'd have to think about in doing that. I don't know, we've been talking here for about 46 minutes, so I think I should hush, and I hope you pick up something from this. You have to work with this stuff for quite a while before you figure out all these things you have to do, and you will do it though. And if you learn it, you can put a tooth anywhere you want to, virtually, within reason. And you can line them up, and you can put torque in them and make it look good. And I'm saying good luck to you. I wish that each of you would subscribe to our channel, and I hope to keep putting these on for a little while longer, but I'm getting old as you can see, and anyway, I am happy to pass this knowledge and it on to everybody over anywhere that will read it and study it and listen to it, and you can back it up and go forward and backwards. And this stuff, the YouTube thing, is marvelous. You can learn from these things. Thank you for listening, and I'm going to close it out now and hope to see you again. Thank you now.